Evening, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First of all, I'd like to do a little housekeeping. As you may be aware, we are now streaming live on YouTube. So a little housekeeping procedures. I need the delegates or applicants that are going to speak to the application at the appropriate time. We're going to ask them to go up to the podium up there, and then they will have to put on the speaker. It'll click the button on it. And wait a few seconds because the camera follows the speaker or follows the speaker when it's put on, okay? So that's number one. Next thing then is I'd like to, first of all, or before that, all applications will be heard, first of all, through our administration by the planners. And then we'll ask comments from the committee, or sorry, from the applicant and or the delegates if they wish to comment on their application. And then we will ask our staff and, I'll ask our committee to any questions they have for the applications, okay? So first of all, I'd like to introduce our committee. First of all, I want to start with our administration. We have Rita Jabor, who is our planning head of our planning services. Corinne Chasson, she's our secretary treasurer and senior planner. Sarah Gerard, who is our planning assistant, who will be leaving us very shortly. Sad to hear, but we have some recovery. And Ian Rawlings, who is our junior planner, and he'll be presenting some of the applications tonight. To my far left is Dan Sauvé, committee member. Then we have Doreen Lester. And on my far right, we have Matthew Child. Okay. So first of all, I would like to do the land acknowledgement, which we do before each of the meetings. So I'll read that out. We acknowledge that this land is traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederation of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, and of the Huron-Wendat peoples. We value the significant historical contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all of the original people of Turtle Island who have been living and working on this land from time immemorial. First of all, now can I hear, do we have any declaring any conflict of interest? Okay, hearing conflict of interest 6.1 to 6.3 from member Dan Sauvé. How does that do for our quorum? We have quorum. Thank you. Okay. Good. All right. I'd like to get a motion to receive the minutes first of the agenda, tonight's agenda with deferral of 6.7. We have an amendment to 6.7. The applicant has voluntarily requested a deferral on 6.7. Can I get a motion to the amended agenda? No, Doreen and Dan. Okay. Okay, and now can I get a motion for the December 19th and the November 21st minutes, which were moved from last time? Can I get a motion to those minutes to acceptance on both? Or if you'd like to take out one.
Mr. Chair, just more procedural question. I abstained from approval of the November meeting record because I wasn't present at the. I'm sorry. I withdraw my question. I'm a month behind these meeting records. So thank you.
We have a motion to receive the minutes. Okay, Doreen and Dan, thank you very much. Okay, so before hearing the first application, I just want to mention that all responses have to come all through the chair, okay, before you can speak. All right, first application is application B0124 4739 Concession Road, fourth concession, Larry Snively. Okay, and I'm going to defer to Ian to present this application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first application is a consent application for the property 4739 4th Concession Road. The property is designated agriculture under the official plan and is split zoned agriculture A1.1 and rural residential R1.3 under the Town of Essex official plan, zoning bylaw. The subject lot is 4.76 acres and currently contains a single detached dwelling, a pool, and an accessory structure in the rear yard. The applicants are looking to sever a 50 by 155 foot piece of land from the subject property to be added to the neighboring property, 4741 4th Concession Road. The purpose of this lot addition is to allow the neighboring property to construct an additional dwelling unit in their rear yard. I would like to note at this time that the next application to be discussed, being the construction of the additional dwelling unit, is also subject to a minor variance and is the following application, but will be discussed separately. Next slide. So this slide here is just the site plan that was provided detailing the required setbacks and that the...
1 second. I'm going to turn.
Testing. Okay. Yep, so the following site plan was provided, just detailing that all buildings on the lot meet the provided setbacks. Next slide, please. This here is the subject property, Larry Snively's property, detailing his house and his driveway. Next slide. And then here we have the lands that are going to be severed and consolidated with 4741 4th Concession. Currently, you can see a couple trees there, but no agricultural operations happening at this time. Go to the next slide, please. Now, as I previously mentioned, this property is split zoned, rural residential and agriculture 1.1. But right now, the lands that are to be severed are currently zoned agriculture 1.1, and it's to be consolidated with 4741 4th Concession, which is rural residential 1.3. But at this time, we're not requesting that the applicants rezone their property to match the zoning because there's other properties in the vicinity with the same split zoning. I'd also like to detail that at this moment, there's no agricultural operations happening in the rear yard, and it's deemed that the property is too small to have any viable agricultural operation. Next slide. And that's also detailed here with this being the image of that rear yard, just detailing the agricultural agricultural zone, if you will. And next slide from here. So here we've gone through our standard consent policies just to detail if it conforms with the provincial policy statement and the County of Essex official plan, which details we can make lot adjustments for legal and technical reasons. And that's the Town of Essex official plan. We also comply with the reasonings and regulations found there as well. Next slide, please. So as typically found when you sever from an agricultural zoned property, you also have to recognize the loss of the agricultural lot area if under 100 acres total. The subject property is 4.76 acres, and it is now being reduced to 4.58 acres. Therefore, we need to recognize this through a minor variance to permit the following to happen. Next slide, please. So here, again, we ran this through the 6 tests of the minor variance, and we found that it conforms with the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw. The intent of that 100-acre lot area is to make sure that a viable farming operation, that we don't take away from that viable farming operation. However, right now there's no agricultural operation on this property, and we deem that it's too small to host such an operation. And it's actually proved desirable to have this land consolidated with 4741 4th Concession, as it allows them to build an additional dwelling unit, and that's their intent. So it supports that sort of housing as well. There's also no found impact to any neighboring characteristics or traffic as well. Next slide, please. So from here, we've only gotten one comment from external agencies, being the Essex Region Conservation Authority, which expresses no objections at this time. And next slide, please. Here we have our conditions. So far, we have standard conditions to accompany this file, including granting of the minor variance, and the applicants have 2 years to fulfill all of these conditions as typically found. Next slide, please. And finally, just wanted to remind the committee of their potential decisions to approve, defer, or deny the application. Here, staff is recommending that you approve both the consent application B0124 and minor variance application A0124. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is there anybody from the applicants that wish to speak on this particular issue? Anybody else in the audience? Okay. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to go to the committee. Is there any questions that need to be asked? Hearing none, then can I get a motion for this particular application? Seconded by Mr. Matthew Child. All in favor? That's approved. We need to move on to then application A0124, which is the minor variance for the same application. Can you quickly speak to that, Ian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you wanted to pull up the PowerPoint once again. Perfect. Oh, I'm going to reset my mic. Oh, we're good. Okay. The second application tonight is a minor variance application. Oh,
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to confirm that we only moved the consent application. We did not move the minor variance A0124, or did we?
No, we are
in the last motion?
sorry.
Here. So as Sarah noted, only B01 has been voted on. So as it was presented, both B0124 and A0124 have been presented together. We ask you kindly to make another motion with regards to A0124 because it was presented as a combo. Okay.
Thank you. Can I get a motion then on good, Doreen? Thank you. Second. Thank you. Mr. Child, all in favor? That is approved. Thank you. Free to go now. Oh, no, you can stay for the next application, obviously. Okay, the next application we want to hear then is correct, yeah, is application A0224, 4741 Concession Road 4, Mr. Scott Waters. And Ian, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next application is a minor variance application for the property 4741 4th Concession Road. The subject property is designated agriculture and is zoned residential 1.3, being rural residential. It currently contains a single detached dwelling and accessory structure in the rear yard. However, once the lands that are severed from 4739 4th Concession Road are consolidated with 4741 4th Concession, the subject property will be 1.74 acres in total lot area and will be split zoned R1.3 and A1.1. Next slide, please. So the applicant is looking to construct an accessory structure and additional dwelling.
Gentlemen, just kind of, we're overhearing your conversation. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. The applicant is looking to construct an accessory structure and additional dwelling unit in the rear yard on the lands to be consolidated with the subject property. The additional dwelling unit will be 2,000 square feet in gross floor area and will be located 7.62 meters from the rear lot line. It is important to note that the variance only pertains to the additional dwelling unit, as the attached accessory structure abides by all zoning regulations and is viewed as a separate use from the additional dwelling unit. Therefore, they're considered two separate uses to be looked at differently. Now, when constructing any type of development that sits on land that is split zoned, the development must abide by the most strictest of regulations found. So for in this instance, the additional dwelling unit and accessory structure sit upon both the rural residential zone and agricultural zone. So the strictest of any regulations found, it must abide by. Next slide, please. So as this is the case, section 8.15B 2Is states that a second dwelling unit shall not be permitted if constructed in an accessory structure cannot be located in a required yard. As the subject development sits in a split zoned agriculture and rural residential, it has a required rear yard of 15 meters or 50 feet. The applicant is requesting relief from section 8.15B 2Is to permit a setback of 7.62 meters. Next slide, please. So here, the applicants have provided a rendering of what the building would look like, as well as a floor plan. It's a 2-bedroom additional dwelling unit attached to the accessory structure, and they're both 1 story in height, as per the regulations of the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. Here again, we also have some elevations that were provided. In the next slide. And lastly, we have some cross sections that were also provided, detailing that it's 1 story as well. Next slide. Thank you. This here is the subject property, just with the main single detached dwelling. Next slide, please. And here are the lands that the additional dwelling unit and accessory structure will be constructed upon. At the top image, they will be located around where that grouping of 5, I think it's coniferous trees are. And then also detailed below is the lands to be consolidated with 4741 4th concession. And that's partially where they'll be located as well. Next slide, please. All right, so as typically found with a minor variance application, we have to consider the 6 tests of a minor variance. And we found that this conforms with the official plan, being that additional dwelling units are permitted. We found that the zoning bylaw is, the intent is maintained, as the required 50-foot setback for agricultural lots is more so to provide both a buffer between agricultural operations, provide adequate drainage and circulation, whereas this is the use of the ADU is to be for residential purposes. Therefore, they'd only need things such as amenity space, minor drainage capabilities, and privacy. And we found that that was maintained with this setback of 7.62 meters. Lastly, there's no impact to neighboring characteristics, and parking's provided, so no impacts to parking as well. Next slide, please. So here I also included a snippet of their site plan, and I put a green line in it detailing if the entire property was zoned rural residential, so R1.3, that the setback would actually be, sorry, just give me one moment, would actually be 7 meters, meaning that the setback that they're proposing of 7.62 meters would actually, it would abide by those setbacks. So it does conform to the setbacks of a rural residential zone. However, it's just not zoned rural residential for its use. Next slide, please. Now, we did receive 2 comments, one from an external department being the Essex Region Conservation Authority, which expressed no objections at this time. And the second is from the development, actually it's from Infrastructure Services, detailing the options for installing a water meter as well. This is kind of a standard, not condition, but I would say a comment for all additional dwelling units that are installed in these areas, and does not need to be included as a condition. It can be discussed further if needed. Next slide, please. Lastly, we do have one condition posed on this minor variance, and it's that the lands to be severed from 4739 4th concession be consolidated with this subject property. Please note that this condition does not have a time limit on it. However, the consent application, that does have a time limit on it being 2 years. So if the consent application, if that isn't completed in time, this minor variance technically lapses as well. Next slide, please. All right, and lastly, I just wanted to detail again the options that the committee has to either A, approve the decision, defer it, or deny the application. It is recommended by staff that the application be approved with the one attached condition. Thank you.
Okay, now we have, I know Mr. Scott Waters is online. Do you have any comments to this application, Mr. Waters?
Not really. You know, it all depends if what happens. But if everything goes well, then yes, I don't really have anything to say. So
Okay. That's
other
good,
than
thanks.
because it's going to happen with this agricultural and the residential, from what I've been told by the town, is that eventually that's all going to be incorporated in maybe the next 2 or 3 years term. So really the agricultural has nothing to do with this, but it does because it's still a bylaw at this point.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak to it? No? Okay, thank you. Oh. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for that. All right, I'm going to go to the committee and for any questions. Any questions? Through Mr. Childs, go ahead.
This is the first time while I've been on the committee that I've seen one of these, so I just have a question more for my own interest. I see that a structure that combines a 3,100 square foot storage area with a 2,000 square foot dwelling is proposed. And could the town help me understand the rules around sizing of ADUs? What goes into, are there limits? Any comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, additional dwelling units for residential and agricultural properties. Specifically, this one is restricted to 1 story in height as it's located in a residential zone. But furthermore, their gross floor area has to be smaller than the main dwelling on the property. So for this instance, the dwelling is around 2,300 square feet. This additional dwelling unit being 2,000 square feet. And then, although it's attached, that accessory structure is seen as a separate use, and it doesn't abide by the same regulations.
Thank you. All right, any further questions? Not seeing any. Can I get a motion on this application? Mr. Child? Okay. Moved by Mr. Child and seconded by Ms. Lister. All in favor? That's approved. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Waters. Go enjoy the nice weather down there. Feel sorry for us up here. All right. Yeah, thank you. The next applications we'll hear together. Excuse me?
Mr. Waters said he does have an opportunity to leave the meeting.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Mr. Waters, you do have an opportunity to leave the meeting if you like. You don't need to hang around, or if you do want to feel sorry for us up here, then you can. Thank you. Our next application then will be heard together. It's application A 0324 3116 County Road 11 for consent application. And sorry, wrong. We have B, looking at the wrong one, B 0224 3116 County Road 11 and A 0324 3116 County Road 11 for a minor variance. And we do have a third application on this one. It's B 0324, which is a application for a easement. Okay, so we'll hear them all from the planner. And Mr. Rawlings, if you go ahead. Thank you.
Sure. The applicants of 3116 County Road 11 are looking to sever a surplus lot. The lands are designated agriculture and zoned agriculture. The subject property is currently 73 acres in size and has 2 single detached dwellings and 6 accessory structures on the property. The applicants are requesting to sever 12 acres from the farming property as it has been deemed surplus to the needs of the farm. The surplus lands will contain a frontage of 33 feet along County Road 11 and contains the 2 existing single detached dwellings and 6 accessory structures. Next slide, please. And the retained land will be approximately 61 acres and will have a frontage of 33 feet along County Road 11 and 15 feet along 4th concession. Alongside the consent application to sever the surplus lot is a standard minor variance application recognizing the deficient lot size. However, a consent application to apply an easement to the lands has also been included, but will be detailed last as well. Next, please. So here we have a couple images of the severed land. You can see here the 2 single detached dwellings and a bit of the, there will be a bit of agricultural land included in as well to maintain the 12 acres and to maintain more of an orderly development. Next slide, please. So here we have a consideration of the policy. We identified that the application is supportive of the provincial policy statement and County of Essex official plan, being that the land to be severed is surplus to the needs of the farm. Excuse me. Additionally, natural heritage has been found on this property, being the most northern part, and the applicants have agreed to apply a conservation easement over these lands, and that has been included as a condition. I do want to note that the conservation easement is not the easement B0324 to keep those from being mixed up. Next slide, please. So as standard, the minor variance, the application does require a minor variance as the 73 acres is being reduced down to 61 acres and 12 acres respectively. Next slide, please. So we found that the intent of the zoning bylaw and official plan has been maintained as the viability of the farming operations is not threatened through the reduction in agricultural area. And the requested 12 acres is actually to maintain 12 animal units for the surplus lot as to accommodate around 12 cows as well. That's why 6 outbuildings are also being requested at this time and a bit of agricultural property. Furthermore, no impacts to the character area are foreseen and no additional impacts as well. Next slide, please. Now, an easement is required to move forward with this severance due to the fact that there's minimal frontage for both the retained and surplus land. There's approximately 66 feet of frontage that can be utilized. So this 66 feet of frontage is going to be split into 2 sections, one being 33 feet, the other also being 33 feet. But there's going to be 2 easements established. Easement A is going to be owned by the surplus lands, so the people that reside in these single detached dwellings, but the retained farming operation will have access to the land of easement A at all times so that they can still access the farm and bring their equipment through. Now, easement B will be owned by the farm operation so that they, 1, still have frontage, but then 2, so that they can farm the land. But it will also be the owners of the surplus land will have access to the lands of easement B as their utilities currently run both underground and through a power line above that land. So it's important that they have access to it as well. And the reason we're not requiring that a new access be placed is because there's currently a hydro pole and all those services right at the foot of the property of easement B where it fronts County Road 11. Next slide, please. So with that, we considered the policy. It does not provide any impacts to the agricultural operations. Currently, that land is being farmed and the single detached dwellings are being lived in. So it has been demonstrated that the lands can be shared and they would operate as existing. Next slide, please. So here we just have a couple images of what those easement lands would look like and what the frontage of the property looks like. So here we have easement A and B detailed with the lettering here, but that's about the only frontage that this property has, as all the surrounding area is owned by another individual. Next slide, please. Here we have another view of this as well when you're inside the property looking towards the road. And next slide, please. And then lastly, if you recall from the aerial view, there was a little sliver that kind of fronted along 4th Concession. And I just wanted to include a little snippet of what this would look like. It is not currently a viable access and would require some major changes to both the natural heritage features, the drains along 4th Concession, and so forth. So it's not deemed feasible or appropriate at this time. Next slide, please. So here we did get 2 comments from external agencies, one from the County of Essex, just detailing standard setbacks from their roadways, and then the second from the Essex Region Conservation Authority, stating no objection. Next slide, please. So here we do have the conditions of the consent application. There we go. So with it, a couple ones that stand out, we are including the conservation easement. And then we also have 2 other conditions detailing that an easement is established to provide access to the retained lands, and that an easement is established to provide services to the severed lands. And then lastly, the condition 11 highlighted in yellow is a standard condition when accompanying a minor variance with a surplus severance. However, it was not contained within the planning comments, so I wanted to address it at this time and ask that it be added. Should the committee approve the application. Next slide, please. Next, the consent applications require their own movement as well, just one. However, they would have conditions as well to ensure that the wording on the conditions is appropriate. And these are those conditions, standard conditions for a consent application, except no drain apportionments are needed. Next thank you. Lastly, the decisions of the committee can be approve this application, defer, or denial. It's recommended through the planning department that you approve this application along with the accompanying minor variance and easement application. Thank you.
Well explained. Now, anybody here representing the applicant, and do you wish to speak to the application? And if so, just go to the podium. No, if you don't, that's fine. You're not obligated to. Okay, thank you. And there may be questions, so we'll. Now, can I go to the committee and for any questions? Doreen, go ahead.
Chair, I have a few questions for Mr. Rawlings. I'm just wondering, according to the ministry, what is the requirement for 12?
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair. So right now, our zone, this goes through our zoning bylaw. For us, we have 1 acre per 1 animal unit. And so being 12 acres, requesting 12 animal units. And then each animal unit permits a specific amount of animals dependent on the animal. So currently 1 acre would be for 1 cow, for example.
It's new, I apologize. How many acres of currently workable farmland, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Rawlings, are being taken out of circulation?
Micro. Okay. So when I conducted the calculation for it, roughly 3 acres, I would say, were taken out.
And I have one more through you, Mr. Chair. I didn't, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see a condition of an access agreement. Is there an access bridge, a culvert there? I didn't have an opportunity to drive out and review this particular one, so.
Testing my. Okay. Sorry, these are throwing me off there. Through you, Mr. Chair, an access already exists, so we didn't have to include it as a condition. And that's what the easement would help serve for.
For you, Mr. Chair. No, so there is an existing culvert access. So who's maintaining it? If there's easements over top, you're not requiring an access agreement for the maintenance of the culvert?
I believe, through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that would be included or detailed in the easement agreement, who would have to maintain it or any cost sharing for any maintenance or upgrading to it. But right now it's currently being maintained by the farm, and it would be, it is owned and maintained by the farm. But once severed, it would be fully owned by the individuals who own the surplus lands. However, that could be adjusted, the costs and sharing and maintenance could be adjusted through the easement agreement itself. Thank you.
Sure, Dan. Mr. Sauvé?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The question I have is on the easement width for A and B. Obviously, they're equal in width, but what is that measurement? Might have missed it.
The width of the easements, they're both 33 feet, as there's only 66 feet of frontage along County Road 11. So it was divided in half equally.
Mr. Sauvé? Mr. Child, do you have any questions? I'll defer to you, given that you might want to formulate her questions again. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, could we go back to the sort of the air photo that no, it was in the one in our planning packet. I don't know, maybe it's, there we go. This is an unusual parcel. There's two very narrow road frontages. Most of the property abutting County Road 11 and to the west, and the third to the south aren't part of the property. What's the history? Do we know? Is it and like what's going on? How did it end up like this?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there is a little bit of history with the property. It's been irregular. You can see that here. We have not found any reasons for the access at the top, the north end. We did not find any past history on that, why that was created. Probably just an access from some time ago. But the town of Essex, we do not have a minimum width for frontage. We don't have a minimum frontage requirement in the zoning bylaw. We only have a minimum width. And this will satisfy the minimum width for a lot. And it also will provide frontage to make sure that a property is not landlocked. One of the things that you will notice in this air photo is that there is that small narrow corridor behind the surplus lot. And the reason for that is to make sure that obviously it is not a landlocked property. So that narrow corridor at the back would give a laneway for the anybody that is dealing with the crop rotation or whatever have you can get equipment back through there and then around. One of the questions that was also asked was how much land was being taken out of agricultural production. It is my understanding that the applicants do wish to have some of that extra area for agricultural, for pasture land, for the cows, and then potentially a little bit of room extra there for grazing and so forth. So that's the reason for that little extra area, and then also to not have really irregular property lines. In this case, it's more rectangular and linear in this case. So hopefully that answers the question through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
That was your question. You answered it.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do have a couple of other questions, but I'll defer to the chair and other members who might be wanting to ask questions. Thank you.
Ms. Lester, you had another question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant, are you living in the home currently? And your intention is to reside there permanently? Do you currently have cattle? Okay, and so, and do you sell the cattle? Oh, perfect. Okay, excellent. So you're going to be using it for an agricultural purpose still, just in a different manner. Okay, so you're just going to help feed our community. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Mr. Trout.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. To the applicants, do you own other agricultural properties in the vicinity?
I'll ask you then to go up there because it looks like there are going to be a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicants, do you own other agricultural properties in the area?
No, we don't.
Last time we met, we talked about perhaps a slightly similar example where the town's surplus dwelling policy in the official plan talks about the intent of surplus dwellings being where there's an existing agricultural operation with a home on it. A second agricultural property is brought into the farm through acquisition that also has a home on it. And obviously an operator only needs one home in which to live. So by right, one of those homes can be severed. So perhaps to staff, can you help me understand how the intent of this official plan policy is met in this instance?
Okay, Corinne, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So what we have here is an applicant that is looking to work with a adjacent landowner that is going to purchase the surplus lands. They have worked together that they are going to purchase and consolidate the lands that the applicant no longer require. Okay, so they're going to have their hobby farm, which is on the surplus lot, and then a neighboring property owner that has an agricultural operation who has more than one property. They have submitted a farm consolidation form, which shows that they are consolidating the farmlands, the vacant farmlands, with their operation. That does qualify underneath the official plan requirements that they are working together to consolidate those lands. One of the things that has changed in the Planning Act was that applicants were allowed to apply to have a consent if they were a potential purchaser. And that was allowed, I believe, in 2021. That allowed them to apply to the Committee of Adjustment to have a surplus lot, and even if they weren't the owner yet. So what we do at the Town of Essex is we do allow them to work together, that the potential purchaser can work with the current landowner and work together to apply to the committee for a consent application for a surplus lot. And that's what we're doing here. So the potential buyers of this property, they do qualify as bona fide farmers and that they own the lands in order for this to be consolidated with. And Mr. Chair, if Mr. Rawlings wants to add anything to that, I would as well.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, to add, as Corinne has detailed, the applicants have also entered into a formal legal agreement with a purchaser, binding that purchaser to this property, deeming them partial owner of this property, fulfilling that further need as detailed in the provincial policy statement and other official plans that fall underneath it. Thank you.
Does this satisfy your questions, or would you have further requirements?
Responds to my question. I did have a couple of other questions, but again, I'll defer to other members if they have questions. Okay, and bear with me here, folks, but the packet did elicit a couple of thoughts. So I'm on page 22 of the 43-page PDF, the January Committee of Adjustment packet, and there's a statement under conformity with Town of Essex official plan policies, sort of in the middle of that page. It says, the applicant will be required to consolidate the severed lot with the abutting lands located at 4739 4th Concession Road. I didn't know what that meant.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would just be an error on my part, on staff's, when writing these comments. So that statement, I would say, is not applicable to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. There's two homes on the property, the proposed severed lot. To the applicants, was there a consideration of severing just one of the homes? Can you help me through the thinking on wanting a property that has two homes on it?
Okay, the reason behind this is a family farm that has been in the family since 1835. We do not want to sever those houses. The main house, the bigger house at the top, is the main house. The second house we use as a rental income. That is why we want to keep that home. And it's part of the history to that area. And we don't want to sever them because we want to try to keep as much of the main homestead as possible.
In that, there's obviously a rich history with this property, and I can just imagine the importance of the property as an agricultural property over literally more than 100 years. I think my final question, and I'll ask staff if they have a perspective through you, Mr. Chair, on this, is one of the tests that we're asked to think about as committee members relative to the minor variances, that the variance is minor. And that's subjective. So everyone's going to have a different perspective on what that means. The official plan policy of the town, the surplus dwelling policy states that the size of the surplus dwelling lot should not be greater than 1 hectare. The proposal here is for 4.9 hectares. I understand, and the applicants have expressed why. This is an unusually large property, that's proposed to be severed. I'm struggling as a committee member to reconcile minor with almost a 5-time increase in the official plan, policy stating that, the surplus dwelling lot should not be greater than 1 hectare. Does staff have a perspective on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In these certain circumstances where, in order for us to consider the viability of what that property is going to be used for, what we have is an applicant, which is, it's atypical, similar to another one that we did here before, where they are looking to continue to use a farm use on this property, but they do not want to have, for instance, the cash crop anymore, but they still want to utilize it with the outbuildings, with the paddocks, or in this case, the pasture, and they want to continue that farm use. So in the official plan, we do, there is a policy that states that you can offer consideration on a site-by-site basis for the use of what's existing there. And in this case, I think it is staff's recommendation that this is atypical, and for the use to continue, the applicants would require some extra land in order to consume the outbuildings, and then to also have, for the support of the cattle, they cannot have more than 12 animal units because of the size, as Mr. Rawlings stated. But we also looked at including the second dwelling unit with that area, and then also that linear shape. And we felt that it was not taking agricultural lands out of production because it was still going to be used for a farm use, a very specified farm use. So in this case, that's why we offered our recommendation for approval in this case. Thank you.
I hope that answers your questions. Thank you very much. Okay. If I did not hear you, oh, sorry, Mr. Sauvé, go ahead.
You, Mr. Chair. Question I have is with staff on this application for the secondary home, will it be in the overlay on the GIS system to show that there will be no severance in the future? If you ever want to decide to sever that house in the future? Okay.
Mr. Rawlings, answer that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The restrictive layer will be testing. Through you, Mr. Chair, the restrictive layer will be placed over the property. It won't include the severed lands as they have the houses on them. However, if the applicants look to sever the house from sever the 2 houses apart, that would be brought before the committee again and reviewed at that time. But no additional single detached dwellings will be permitted. And as the severed land contains 2 single detached dwellings, they wouldn't be able to accompany an additional dwelling unit as well. Thank you.
I think we've heard a lot of questions on this application. I'm going to add just a couple real quick ones on mine, and then a comment. So number one, just for clarity on the easement to administration, on easement B, which is will be owned by the retained lot with farming, did that require any improvements to the culvert for access? And is that the only farming access that will be used?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no upgrades were required. Those services that were detailed for the easement B, and actually for easement A for being the access, no upgrades were required, and that is the only utilized access at this time.
Coaching everybody else. On the air photo, so the aerial photo, it delineates the area that's going to be retained. There is an outside area to the west and to the north that are not part of this. Is that a separate piece of property? And can I get some explanation? Was that in the application? Did I miss that? Owned by somebody else? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you're referring to the upside down Ls, those are separate pieces of property and they've been historically in existence for some time.
And my question further then, is that owned by other property and farming?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
So, well, those are quick yes, no answers, but does it have any effect on this for servicing or the agricultural aspect? Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So like I said, they're two properties. They are under the agricultural designation. They've been owned historically separate for some time now. And I'm assuming that they do some crop sharing with the adjacent or with these owners. Perhaps the owners could give you a little bit more information on that.
And your answer will help me out as well. So what it looks like is we're going to have 3 separate farming operations here. And the last one, who owns the access to the last parcel, which is delineated as the L shape, I guess we'll call. And then you can answer.
So the two L-shaped properties, they have their own access. They do not share this one, and they are vacant properties. So like I stated, when we're looking at these properties here, perhaps the applicants can give us some information as to if there is some kind of crop sharing agreement that they also work in agreement with those two L-shaped properties to farm those lands. Thank you.
Okay, there is 2 separate accesses for each one of those properties, which Corinne has noted. And there was crop sharing. There was sharing of that. What is going to be done with the new owner? I'm not sure if they want to continue. That would be up to them, but that is farmed there also. That is also farmland that is farmed.
I'm going to go one last question back to administration because I'm just missing something. So the L-shaped property, we'll call that. That's a separate parcel of owned property. And do they need their own access?
Through to you, Mr. Chair, they already have their own accesses and don't require any of the L shapes specifically.
So then can you tell me where those accesses are?
To you, Mr. Chair. Oh. To you, Mr. Chair, I would have to look at the mapping to determine them. However, they are not conjoined with this application. So those weren't under review by administration.
That doesn't affect that property whatsoever then. So they don't ever require access or where it is. I'm still missing that.
If you look at the map, John can point where the accesses are.
For the north section, the roadway's right here, or actually, I believe it's right there where that little white spot is.
That's
It's right
where,
along this section of road anyways, right, not too far from our driveway. And then for the south end, it's, right down by the solar panel. Off of County Road 11.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, can I leave a motion?
I don't have a question. I do have a statement.
And then you can speak to the. Okay. All right, Ms. Lester moved and Mr. Sauvé seconded. Now you may.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, to the motion. So I'm very sympathetic to the applicant's interest in continuing to farm the property. As a committee member, I'm asked to see if the 4 tests of a minor variance are passed. In this case, one of them being the general intent of the official plan. My understanding of the surplus dwelling provisions of the official plan, it is a residence that's surplus to an agricultural operation. It's not 2 residences in surrounding agricultural land. So I'm concerned that the general intent isn't met. The second test of 4 is the variance is minor. And again, I understand the context and the uniqueness of this application, but the official plan talks to a lot size of it no more than a hectare. We're looking at almost 5. So for me, I'm not satisfied that test is met either. So unfortunately, I can't support the application tonight. Thank you.
Comments to the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Denied? 1. Thank you. That's approved. Thank you. And we voted on all 3 of them? Let's do this again. Right? Yeah. We did these both. Did we do both of these? Yeah. Yeah, can I move her and a seconder for AO3? Yeah. Doreen and Dan. Okay, thank you. All in favor? Good. And the last one for the easement, V0324. Doreen and Dan. All in favor? That has passed as well. Sorry for the technicality.
I just want to confirm that you, Member Childs, that you are in approval of BO 324 for the easement, correct?
That is correct. My esteemed committee members approved the previous 2. So given that that's done, it makes sense there be an easement. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to hear last 2 applications of B 1422 108 County Road 50 and A 1122 108 County Road 50, Mr. Bernie Gorski. Okay, Ian, sorry, Corinne, you're going to restate that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Last application on the agenda tonight, B1422. Property address is 108 County Road 50 East. And the owner is joining us today, Mr. Bernard Gorski, and he is the owner of this property, which is designated agricultural in the official plan zoning. It is also zoned agricultural in the zoning bylaw. What we have here is a property that's 70 acres in size. And what you're looking at is the severed lot is the green area shown on the air photo, and the retained is the purple area hatched. And what we have is the green area is a vacant cash crop, part of a farming operation. The purple area is a winery operation, Crew Winery. And the intent of the applicant is actually to split these uses separately for estate planning purposes, for instance, in this case. So what we're looking at is to do a lot addition. The green area there would be added to the lands to the north, as shown in the air photo. One of the reasons why we are bringing this application back is it was deferred previously in 2022 because there was a item that we needed to correct, which was a very small piece of land shown on the screen here with a blue arrow in the inset. And those lands were actually, it's an easement that allows access to several of the farm properties, but Mr. Gorski did not actually own that small sliver of land. And his intent was to join the lands that he owns to the northern property and to join them all together. So access would actually be from the Gore lot, which is to the north. And Mr. Burney can confirm that all of these lands are farmed together from the Gore lot all the way to basically where that purple boundary is. Next slide, please. What you can see here is the site plan that was provided by Mr. Gorski. One thing to note is that blue line area just shows an existing sewer line easement, which services the winery and then connects over to County Road 13. And you can see here that that will remain with the winery lands, and that the lands to the north, the lot addition, do not have any of that sewer line easement on it. Next slide, please. Just some photos from the property here. This is a photo of the easement. It's just a path that Mr. Gorski can utilize if he needs to bring any farming equipment through there to access the property. But he currently does farm all of the lands from Gore all the way down as one large property as it stands now. So what we're going to be doing is just simply consolidating them all together. Next slide, please. Just some more pictures of that being all farmed together. Next slide. And again, looking north towards Gore. Next slide. And then looking towards the winery. Just that blue line there kind of shows you the rough estimate where that land divide would be. Next slide. And again, just another perspective. And next slide. When we were reviewing the application, we were looking to make sure that it did satisfy all of the requirements for the policies. It is compliant with the provincial policy statement for the criteria for lot additions. The county official plan also allows lot additions in these technical cases. And the town of Essex official plan states that if there's no impact to the development patterns, and in this case, no new lot is being created, and there is no impacts to the viability of the agricultural operations, being two separate viable agricultural operations, one being a winery, one being for cash crop. And there is no need for any relocation of services in this case. And lastly, is it compliant with the zoning bylaw? In accordance with all of the buildings, the buildings on the property for the winery, they satisfy all of the zoning requirements for setbacks, lot coverage, and so forth. So it is our recommendation to approve this application based on these policy reviews. Next slide, please. As in any case, whenever you are reducing a property size for an agricultural lot, less than 100 acres in size, you do need to be recognized through a minor variance, and this will be the case. So we're going from 70 acres down to 50.4 acres for the severed lot addition, but that's going to be joined up with the lands to the Gore lot, the Gore Road, I'm sorry. And then we will remain with 19.6 acres for the winery. In accordance with the zoning bylaw and the official plan, we do need 10 acres as a minimum for a winery to be viable. This is more than double that, or sorry, it is almost double that. Next slide, please. In accordance with the 6 tests of a minor variance, we found that these were compliant, meets the addition or meets the criteria for additions as I've noted, and it does not affect any setbacks. And this is a specialty crop for the winery, and it definitely separates the cash crop and allows for 2 viable farming operations. It's compatible. There is going to be no change with the characteristic of the neighborhood. And this supports Mr. Gorski's intentions to separate these 2 uses, especially for any future estate planning purposes. Next slide, please. Upon circulation, we did not receive any objections to this application. That includes external agencies, which we did receive from IRCA and from the county because it does front onto a county of Essex road. They're just identifying that if there's any development on the winery property that there's typical setbacks. And then no comments from the public were received or from internal departments. Next slide, please. Should the committee choose to approve this application, here are your typical conditions of consent. Next slide. And lastly, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair. We do have Mr. Gorski here if he wishes to make any comments on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. Mr. Gorski, do you have any comments? And if so, let's go to the podium. If not, you can just wave it off. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to go to the committee for questions. Ms. Lester.
Have a question through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Chason. The easement that you were speaking of, did Mr. Gorski purchase that property? And so now it won't be a landlocked parcel we're creating. It will indeed be able to all be merged. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is absolutely correct. That's one of the reasons why we deferred this application in the first place. So now he does have, he gave us proof that he does own that property. And one of the suggestions that staff would like to make is that that the owner just revisit the language in the easement itself and to make sure that the legal description, if needed, is added to that easement agreement and that we provide, that they provide copy to us. Thank you.
And just one more thing through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I missed it, but so that will be, the consolidation of the pins will be a condition of the severance, correct? Oh, thank you.
Any further questions to the committee? Dan?
Like to make a motion to approve the application with the staff's recommendations.
Yep, moved by Ms. Lester. Seconded by Ms. Lester, I should say. Thank you. Any, all in favor? Any questions? Good. That's approved. A1122, on the minor variance. Can I get a motion on that? Motion by Mr. Child, seconded by Dan, Mr. Sauvé. Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Those both are carried. Thank you very much. All right. Being the last, yeah. All right. Seeing that we've got all the applications, I'm going to ask for adjournment. Mr. Sauvé and Mr. Child. You did move that, right? Good. Thank you. We're adjourned.